Good afternoon, everybody, and you're all very welcome to this InterTradeIreland All-Ireland Innovation Programme event. I'm Dr. Majella Giblin, and I'm a member of the Whitaker Institute at NUI Galway, and we're hosting the event today in collaboration with InterTradeIreland. So this event is part of a series of online events that we're running to support SMEs really in engaging in innovation by disseminating academic thought leadership and best practice to SMEs to support them in their innovation process. And we deliver these events in partnership with our partners in UCC, DCU, Queen's University, Belfast, and of course supported by InterTradeIreland. So you're all very welcome to this event today, which the topic is, and the focus of discussion is on innovation for sustainability. So really the focus is how and why SMEs should embrace sustainability like environmental sustainability or social sustainability as an opportunity space for innovating. So we are in an era where sustainable businesses and businesses that really do embrace sustainability are significant. Despite this, it can be challenging for businesses to really align sustainability with their existing business model and to really create a competitive advantage. So in this particular event today, we hope to shed some light on this and talk about the experiences of others and draw on research in this particular area. So I'm delighted to welcome my panelists this afternoon. We have Marion Breaks, who is from healthbeacon.com. And Marion is the sustainability project manager there. And she has over 20 years experience working in both the profit and non-profit sectors. So Marion is going to give us some insights into the journey that Health Beacon have taken in implementing an innovation around environmental sustainability. We also have Dr. Sinead Mitchell, who is a sustainability engineer at NUI Galway, and she lectures in the area of eco-innovation, and she also researches in this area and has done a lot of consultancy work with SMEs in this area. So we'll draw on some of Sinead's research and her expertise in this area to talk about, for example, future trends around sustainability for innovation. And then we also have Mark Sweeney, and Mark is from InterTradeIreland, and Mark is the national contact point for Horizon Europe in the area of environment and environmental activities. So he has a wealth of experience in energy sectors, and it's super to have all three panelists here today to give their different perspectives. So welcome to all the panelists today. And this is very much a kind of open discussion and a conversation about innovating for sustainability. So we'd very much invite the audience, to engage in the conversation. And you'll just see under the video, there's a box there where you can join the conversation and enter your questions or comments there, and I can put them to the panelists. So please do that at any stage during the session. You don't have to wait till a particular point, and I'll put those questions and comments to the panelists. So without further ado, I think we'll start, and maybe we'll start with Marion, if that's okay. And I should say good morning to Marion, because Marion is actually joining us from Silicon Valley in California. So good morning where you are, Marion, and thanks so much for joining us today. So great. So I think we'll just start first with, you can provide us with that kind of in practice case example of Health Beacon having gone through this process of innovating around environmental sustainability. So maybe could you just take us through first what Health Beacon does and what that innovation was all about that you implemented?
Yeah. Sure. Thank you very much, Majella. And I just want to say thanks very much to Majella and to InterTradeIreland and to NUI Galway for the invitation to speak on this panel. So I have a few slides, and I'll just run through the slides and show you a little bit about Health Beacon and what we've done on the innovation front in sustainability. So Health Beacon is a health technology company, and our mission is to build smart tools for managing medication. So we do this for medications that are taken through injection, and specifically we focus on patients who take their medication in a home setting rather than at a doctor's office. So many of these patients need to go on these types of medications to deal with very serious conditions. And unfortunately, many of them fail to adhere to their schedules, or maybe the clinical system fails to reach out to them and help them when it's needed. So Health Beacon addresses this through their technology, their FDA-approved Smart Sharps bin. And you can see this here sitting on a patient's counter, kind of elegantly fitting into their home, helping them for them as they work to manage their injection routines. So next slide, please. So the problem, as I indicated, is that patients often struggle to keep up with their injection routines. And this could be for a number of reasons. Maybe they forget, or they feel better, or they feel worse, or they aren't clear how to take their medications. But the upshot is they don't stick to their schedules and they don't get the benefits. And then their clinicians have no way of knowing whether it's their medication or their adherence that's causing the issues that they're seeing. So this is what Health Beacon addresses through their Smart Sharps technology. Its innovation is that it captures the moment that the patient disposes their sharp. And just to be clear, a sharp is either a pen device that has a needle in it or a syringe with a needle and an injection device. So if you imagine a diabetic at home taking their insulin, they would have to dispose of their injection. So they dispose of it into this device. It takes a record, a photograph, and a date and time stamp every time they drop their injection. So this information is then uploaded to their care team, and it really helps the doctors and the care team to help the patient. If they come in and they say, well, I'm having these side effects, then the doctor can say, well, you're taking your medication correctly or incorrectly, or you've skipped a dose. So it's been incredibly effective in helping patients to have better health outcomes. Next, please. Next slide. So we currently have over 11,000 connected devices. We've seen over 500,000 injections dropped, and we're in quite a few markets around the world, and we work in several different therapeutic areas. We've also really recently announced a big partnership with Hamilton Beach, a small appliance company in the US. So we're really expanding suddenly out of our smaller markets and into a direct-to-consumer market. Next slide, please. So, of course, what you guys want to hear about is sustainability. And one of the big problems is that this generates an enormous amount of waste. So the WHO estimates that 16 billion injections are disposed of each year, and most of them go into landfill or incineration. It's just a huge amount of waste. So our CEO wanted to try and see if we could somehow disrupt this take, make, waste model and do something different. And so at Health Beacon, we were already taking back our device itself and refurbishing it and reusing it. But we wanted to find different ways to steward our product. And obviously the waste side of it was really the next place to go. And in addition to that, a lot of the pharma companies are putting out these very ambitious climate goals. They want to be climate neutral by 2030 or by 2050, or really reduce their waste or emissions. So we wanted to kind of jump in and see how we could help with this. Next slide, please. So basically, our solution tracks this from end to end. And what happens is that the patient, when their injection is, when their internal bin is full, we actually mail them out or drive them out, depending on their geography, a new bin, and they put that into their device. And then the internal bin itself comes back to Health Beacon. And what we do at Health Beacon now is we have a lab set up where we delid the device, we tip out the internal contents, all the used sharps, and then we sterilize the bin itself and put it back into production. So over the longer term, what we're planning to do is actually take the lid and make that reusable. And then we're working with partners and other really interesting, exciting companies in collaboration to try and develop an injection device or a pen device that can either be reused, or it can be recycled in some way, or it can be turned into, plastic planks or furniture. So really, we're trying to close the entire loop and make the product fully circular. So next slide, please. So we've been working with Clean Technology Centre in Cork, and through their work with us, we've determined that we could save about 49,000 kilos of plastic, about 935,000 liters of water, and 135 tons of carbon by reusing 5,000 bins 25 times. So we really feel like it's a great opportunity to sort of expand and have an actual impact on the pharma industry. And we've gotten an enormous amount of interest in what we're doing. So I think that's kind of the rundown on where we are. Let me know if you have any questions. Like I said, we're kind of expanding into all these different markets, and we've had a lot of enthusiasm and excitement about what we're doing.
That's great, Marion. Thank you so much. And it's really impressive, those kind of figures there in terms of the savings that could be made. In terms of the journey that Health Beacon has taken on this around implementing this innovation, what have been the kind of challenges or roadblocks that you've encountered?
Well, I would say the first roadblock is the fact that you have to go through a lot of regulatory requirements. Because we're dealing with medical waste, trying to get over the regulatory hurdles in various geographies is very challenging. So we submitted our application with the EPA for processing waste in Dublin quite a long time ago, and we're still waiting for approval. So we have this fully built, ready to go operational lab in Dublin, and there's nothing we can do until EPA signs off on it. And it's no fault of EPA's. Obviously, they're doing the best they can. It's just the reality of the regulatory environment that makes it challenging. So that's for us has been the biggest challenge, and expanding into different geographies for every new place we go. So we're now opening up a lab in Florida, in Orlando. We have the same issue. How many different regulatory hurdles do you have to kind of jump through before you can get your lab up and running? So I would say that's been the biggest one. What has not been an issue has been interest, stakeholder engagement. Everybody's really excited. If anything, we've sort of had to back off in our publicity and say, we're not quite there yet.
So it sounds like when you were describing there the different steps involved, that there was it wasn't just solo kind of all done in Health Beacon. Like, you talked about various different networks that have been involved. Like, is it important to have that kind of collaboration?
100%. So I would say one of the biggest pieces for us has been the amazing collaborations that we've been involved with. And just recently, actually 2 weeks ago, we were founding members of a nonprofit that is called the Alliance to Zero, and that's with 7 other supply chain companies. So that's a really exciting collaboration. And this is again on how do we make a net zero pen device or an injection device. So that kind of collaboration has really been fantastic and really interesting.
And you mentioned also a collaboration there with, is it with the plastics company, or that to reinvent the plastic? Then how did that come about, or how did that collaboration or partnership happen?
Well, so at the moment we're exploring collaborations with a few different plastic recycling companies. And everybody is really keen. Like, once you start to step into the sustainability industry and look around, everybody's really interested, and I think they recognize that this is the moment that we need to take and run with. These next 10 years are really critical. So I apologize if you guys can hear the leaf blower outside. I'm really sorry. I've tried to get my husband to stop them, but that's Silicon Valley for you. So I apologize for the noise. Yeah, no, collaboration hasn't been a problem. We've reached out and people have been very, very interested in talking to us.
Okay, yeah. And it sounds like that is a key kind of enabler or a key driver, because, if you are moving into the sustainability space, it's often it could be a new space for a company. It wasn't the original part of the original business model. So you probably need those kind of networks and collaborations. It seems to me that the return on investment or the economic kind of return may not be instant from something like that, and it typically isn't when we engage in innovation anyway. But how does your organization deal with that?
I think that's a really good question. So for us, because we have different income streams, our main income stream is obviously through the device itself. This is sort of subsidiary to that, right? It's not the main source of income for the company. And for us, because it's really important to the CEO, I think that as long as we're making a small amount of money, then that's fine. It doesn't have to be a huge financial generator for our organization, because that's not the main thrust of the company, but it is part of our sort of extended producer responsibility.
Okay. So in terms of the CEO backing behind something like this is really important, or the leadership behind it is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is completely driven from the top. I mean, it really is driven from our CEO. He's very environmentally minded, and it was really important to him to shepherd the entire product from cradle to grave, and now from hopefully cradle to cradle.
Okay, brilliant. That's a really interesting kind of case of sustainability, innovation, sustainability in practice. Sinead, if I just move on to you, and you lecture in eco-innovation, and your research is around eco-innovation and working with SMEs in this space. Perhaps you can give us some insight into kind of why SMEs should do this, or what are the kind of future trends? And you're just on mute there, so you might just want to unmute yourself.
The phrase of the year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just got caught out. Okay, so why should SMEs innovate for sustainability? There's just so many reasons. There's many reasons, and Marion alluded to a couple of them there. So first and foremost, looking at the big picture, of course, we're in a planetary crisis at the moment. There's multiple environmental crises that are happening. The EU New Green Deal mentions, the 4 crises of the climate crisis that we all hear about, the pollution crisis, the resource crisis, and of course the biodiversity crisis. So basically the way that we're doing things, and the way that we consume and the way that we produce stuff, is using up way too many resources, as if we had around 4 planets. So while we're doing that, while we're using up all the resources, we're polluting the air, we're polluting the sea, and we're pushing nature from their habitats, pushing the planetary boundaries, and the loss, we're going through a major extinction event as well. You might have heard of all these things. So basically, it's how we make things, what we do, how businesses run, how we consume is all causing these. So there's a lot of actions now to change things over the next decade. As Marion also mentioned, the next decade is going to have a huge amount of change, and this is why it's so important as well for business. So with the Paris Agreement, you may have heard of, is a legally binding agreement for all countries to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and Ireland particularly is the worst performing country in Europe for greenhouse gas emissions. We produce more plastic than any other country in Europe. We're the least circular. We're only 1.7% circular compared to the EU average of about 11%. So we really there's a lot of space for us to improve and to get better on sustainability, because it hasn't really been embedded in Irish businesses yet, where it has taken hold a lot, but there's huge amounts of opportunities out there for SMEs they might not ever even have thought of. And if all of this stuff doesn't resonate with you as a business, the planet and the crisis, and you don't think of it as your day-to-day business, it's really important, because the future successful business is going to be a sustainable one. If you're not considering these things now, you're going to be behind. And there's one thing that when I was doing my research originally, and there's one figure that really I always remind myself of, and it's just really important to think about, and that is how, when you think of industry causing environmental damage, we think of big companies, and they are the ones that often end up maybe in the news or that, and and big companies do have and do cause environmental damage. But when you think of SMEs, you never hear about SMEs in the news or anything like that doing anything. So what percentage do you think do SMEs contribute to environmental damage in Europe? So it's been kind of measured that in Europe, SMEs cause X percentage of industry-related impact. What would you think, Majella? Would that figure be, or anybody?
I'm not sure. I guess Marion might know more than
SMEs specifically.
Well, I suppose SMEs account for probably 90% of businesses, I guess. So, don't they? I think
they do. Yeah, 99%.
99%. Yeah. Wow. So yeah, I'm imagining that percentage is quite high if you take.
Yeah. So that's it. You've hit the nail on the head there. The reasons why that's so high. So 70% is the figure, so
Wow.
70, not 70, 1770. So SMEs contribute to 70% of environmental damage in the EU. So that is because there's so many SMEs, and it's the cumulative effect of all there's 100,000 SMEs in Ireland. So it's about because there's so many SMEs, we all need to do something, and everything matters. Every little piece that we do matters. There's been a war on plastic straws in the last year, and you see some of the memes going around to argument for and against or whatever. And there was one that I always remember as well, is that it's only one plastic straw, said 1 billion people. So it's like the cumulative effect of everything that we do. And a UN report in the last week has given stark warning about us as a society and how it's all linked to our well-being in the future. And evidence is showing that we really need to act really fast in the next decade. We really need to do things. And another really interesting thing from an industry point of view is that even if you don't care about the environment, that's fine. But if you're thinking about your business and you're thinking about the resources that you use in your business, an industry study in Germany has recently analysed, the efficiency of businesses and where they're going to gain their competitiveness in the next 20 years. So in the past, we would have gained a lot of competitiveness through, automation and through being more efficient with people and that sort of stuff. But the next big place where companies are going to gain competitive advantage is around the management of the resources, because we're using up the resources as if we had 4 planets. Resources are going to get more scarce, and as other countries develop, use more stuff, buy more stuff, we make more stuff, that the balance between what's available is going to push prices of resources up really high. And at the moment, there isn't really parity between recycled resources and virgin resources, and there's no real benefit or incentive for companies to use more recycled resources unless they kind of really want to, or they want to engage with it. So that is about to change, and the Irish government has been quite slow on this in the past, and in the last year it has really accelerated a lot. The policy framework is going to change around that, I hope. And there was a heads of bill on the circular economy yesterday that went through government, and the circular economy action plan was up for discussion. We submitted something about it last week. But so in future trends, so the circular economy is the biggest trend. So Marion mentioned it there as well. So shifting to a more circular economy. So that's, if you haven't heard of it, what we do now is we take, we make, we waste stuff. And a circular one is around rethinking how we make stuff and what we make it with, and so that it stays in its life for as long as possible, that it reduces waste, and using renewable energies as well. So it's about thinking of all of that stuff. So other trends, of course, Marion also mentioned it, net zero carbon. So lots of large companies are now pledging net zero carbon. And what does that mean for SMEs? Well, where do SMEs, business to business, where are they? They're within, a lot of them are within the supply chains of these large companies. And these large companies have already, done big leaps around their own sustainability and their products, but they're now looking to their supply chains on making sure that the people that supply to them have also, so you'll become a preferred supplier, so there'll be a lot of more benefit to companies who are doing more around sustainability. So there's also a shift of supply chains as well. Talking about supply chains, there's a shifting in supply chains where due to the pandemic, there's been a huge, massive shock to supply chains, as we're probably all aware of. So that's going to probably change. And there's going to be more micro distribution and more regional distribution. And sustainability in general and the circular economy is going to try to focus more on more regional rather than global supply chains, to be able to manage our own recycling and our own wastes and our own resources within our own countries as much as we can, or within our own regions. And while trying to access net zero carbon, of course, it's not always possible. So carbon credits, I suppose, is the next big trend as well. So carbon credits is a bit of a monster at the moment. There's bad things and good things happening. It's a bit of but the thing that everybody knows is buying carbon credits the cost is going to increase. So just to be wary about carbon credits in general, for that. So there is, So if you
Yes.
think about a circular economy and what an SME, an example of an SME, one of them could be, say, for example, somebody who's producing air conditioning units or something. And instead of them producing air conditioning units for, say, a building or a company, that what is that company actually looking for? It's looking for clean air, it's looking for heating, so it's maybe looking for their HVAC system to be working all the time, and for them to always have pleasant, warm, conditioned air, whatever they want. So instead of us, so an SME who produces these things, instead of thinking about the production of these units and focusing their business model on producing more and more units and making more and more, that they would shift their business model to producing the air. So the customer would benefit from it in that they would, pay a regular amount for nice clean air. They wouldn't own the equipment, so the ownership of the equipment would remain with the company that makes it. So then the onus is on the company to make that stay in its life for as long as possible, to make it repairable, to make sure that the maintenance schedule is done really well, so that it doesn't end up in the bin as quickly as it would have previously. And then the customer wouldn't have to worry about big shocks to having to buy new units all the time or anything like that. So another example of, that happened, the good one that happened last summer, I read on RT website, was a Dublin chef, and she looked at how to reduce food waste while she wasn't working. And so food waste is a massive problem. There's another announcement about tackling food waste today from the government, and that produces a lot of emissions before it even gets to the bin. So making sure that we reduce food waste is really important, because a third of food is wasted globally, and so to extend the shelf life of food, you can dry it out or you can freeze it. So this lady came up with an idea of extending, interesting ingredients into ice cream, and producing new gourmet flavors from vegetables and that sort of stuff, and and extending the life of food by creating ice cream from food that might have otherwise gone off. So
there are lots of trends there that are really driving this, and particularly there's a lot of regulatory kind of trends as well, and things coming up in the regulatory environment, so that SMEs need to be aware of. So in terms of your research and your engagement with SMEs, have there been any kind of toolkits or best practice models that you have come across that are useful to SMEs in embarking on looking at their business in terms of being more sustainable?
So I suppose when SMEs are trying to look to do something, a lot of the time what's stopping them is that they don't actually know what to do, and they don't know where to start. So lack of knowledge around what to do, what their impact has, is a big problem, and what their supply chains are doing. There's a lack of information, good information, and then there's too much information, and it's just very hard to navigate it all. And then up until recently, there has been a lack of suitable supports around toolkits or whatever for SMEs in Ireland, but thankfully in the last year or so there has been a raft of changes in that scheme for different companies. So for micro companies, the LEOs are often the green for micro, and they're offering, for SMEs, Enterprise Ireland stuff. I'm sure Mark is going to talk about that, and there's stuff out there for creative industries, whereas previously this wasn't there, it wasn't available. So that would be access to support, because I suppose as an SME, most SMEs don't have the skills or the knowledge to actually do something to themselves or to measure their sustainability. It's very tricky. It's a very tricky thing to navigate, because there's lots of different types of measures and they're not all standardized. So, to Google things like design for environment, looking at checklists if you're trying to, create a new product. Design thinking is very effective to look at the whole picture of, what to do. But if I was to recommend because it's so difficult to navigate, I would say the first step would be to access the supports that are currently available, to get somebody in looking at your business, to get you to look with the sustainability lens first. Because when I think about sustainability innovation in SMEs, it's about being innovative in your own company. It doesn't have to be about changing the world with one product, like Marion's company has done. It doesn't have to be that groundbreaking. It can be, how can I be more energy efficient here? And it's about taking it one step at a time. And usually when you start taking small steps at the very start, you'd see things with a different lens. You start thinking about, what raw materials am I using here? What supply? Who are my suppliers? What are they doing? It's about taking it one step at a time. And I think the first step, if you don't know where to start, is to get that support, get an expert in.
And on that note, I might bring in Mark to the conversation, because obviously SMEs there in the audience now are probably thinking, this is great, and I want to start looking at the business in terms of sustainability, but it does require resources and it requires investment, and the return might not be immediate. And what kind of resources do EI clients typically go towards when they're engaging in innovation for sustainability? Mark, in your experience?
Hi, Majella. Yeah, I suppose there are two main kind of routes that companies can take, and it really would depend on their state of development and their in-house resources and capability. So many, for example, spin-out companies from universities, highly innovative companies, as well as companies that maybe have been established for a while and have R&D functions in-house, are capable of carrying out. They're used to R&D kind of ecosystems, and they have the capability to carry out projects in-house. But for most other companies, that's simply not the case. They don't have the capacity or the capability to do that. So the other route there would be via collaboration. So there are a number of routes there in terms of collaboration. So they could collaborate with other companies. They could collaborate with research performing organizations such as the universities, the IoTs, the new technological universities. Another example would be via clusters, so working with other companies. So, for example, the technology centers, and I can go into these in a bit more detail maybe in a while, but technology centers or technology gateways. So they're the actual main routes, and that's particularly focusing on sustainable innovation. If we're looking more at an operational level, within house, so more kind of what Sinead touched on in terms of iterative kind of improvements in house. Not so much innovation as moving towards best practice around sustainability. There are different kind of supports there, but there's a multitude of supports and funding available and support programs out there, quite difficult to navigate in some cases, to help them on their journey towards sustainability, or in terms of innovation if they're looking to develop new products, processes, or business models, for example.
Okay, great. And what are the kind of main funding programs that SMEs should look at?
Okay, where do we start? It really is a minefield in terms of navigation. But I'll actually put up on the chat some. There's a recent. I'll discuss some supports at a national level, starting from maybe small scale innovation projects right up to kind of larger projects, because there will be a kind of broad spectrum of innovation capacity within companies, and the nature of the projects will vary. And then possibly move on to some of the European projects at a larger scale and some of the funding that's available there. But there is a very recent resource that was put together by Knowledge Transfer Ireland. I'll just put it in the chat here. I have it pasted in. And that's a directory of all kind of innovation supports for enterprises that are out there at a national level. They do touch on some of the European funding as well, but it's a complete listing there because, as I said, there's a multitude of agencies carrying out or offering these supports. From an Enterprise Ireland perspective, I suppose we cover the whole innovation value chain. So right from small scale projects, an example would be the use of innovation vouchers. So up to kind of 5,000 to explore a new innovation, usually with a listed provider. So it's usually a college or a third level institute where the company can explore an innovation and move it forward. There could be feasibility elements there, etc. Then we have things like the innovation partnerships, where a company could work, and these projects would be up to kind of between the 100, 250,000 level, where a company who doesn't have the capability in-house can bring in usually work with a university. They can also work with other companies, by the way, and try and solve a challenge that they have. So they would use the expertise from the universities to do this. So it's in a way, it's kind of outsourcing their R&D activity in a way. but using expertise that's in the colleges. Then we would have, for companies who want to carry out in-house R&D, we would have the Rdi Fund. Now, usually they're kind of larger SMEs with a bit of capability, and the funding rates will depend on the size of the company and the turnover of the company. So it can be up to 80%, and it will vary across the board. So, sustainability innovation activities can be carried out as part of these projects in-house. Now, they're not competitive, but you need to speak to your development advisor in terms of these. I should have said for the innovation vouchers, there's no need to be an Enterprise Ireland client. These are open to all companies. But unfortunately, for some of the other funding mechanisms, they're usually open to EI clients, the LEO clients, UDROS clients, IDA clients as well. So you just need to check there with your advisors or talk to any of the contact points. The technology gateways, and it was touched on earlier by I think Marion and Sinead, in terms of the technology gateways and the technology centres. There are centres out there. The technology gateways work with the Institutes of Technology and the technological universities, and they would and can look at sustainability activities. An example there would be, just like to pull one, Shannon ABC, for example. If you were looking at waste valorization or valorization of particular waste products from your own processes to create value, circular economy kind of activities there. And there's a number of others. SEAM, for example, would look at engineered materials. So you could be looking at resource efficiency there, substitution of critical raw materials, that kind of thing. They look at that. So they're good resources for companies to access. The technology centres more look at kind of strategic problems or challenges that are facing industrial sectors. So a good example here in the sustainability space and the manufacturing space would be the Irish Manufacturing Research Centre, IMR, and they're based down in Mullingar and Rathcoole. They have a separate section there. So they do a lot of work around circular economy. So you can become a member of these or an associate of the IMR and work with other companies, a lot of peer-to-peer activities. There's funding available. They may look at applying for project funding from European sources. But there's a lot of information. They've developed toolkits as well in terms of sustainability. So that's kind of it from an Enterprise Ireland perspective. I'm really scratching the surface here, by the way. So get in touch if anyone has any more, wants to speak more on this. But there are also a plethora of national funding programs through other agencies. For example, energy efficiency, things around energy, the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, Department of Agriculture have funding mechanisms. We have the Department of the Marine as well, so the Marine Institute. So there's a lot going on out there in terms of funding. And again, that KTI resource is very good there for trying to signpost you in the right direction. Moving on to kind of European funding, and again, there are two types of project. The collaborative project, where companies would get involved in either a research or a demonstration kind of project, what they call innovation actions in Horizon Europe. And they can get involved in the project. Usually these are led by an academic institute, but they can be led by industry also. So through, say, some of the European industry organizations or platforms. And typically these projects can be anything from 1-2 million up to 10 million. And the funding for the company to carry out their activity, which is essentially, it should be aligned to what they're kind of doing anyway. It could be, for example, an activity involved around optimization of a particular product that they have, or adding functionality to a product or whatever. And then the second one is for the company to do it themselves. So you're looking more higher TRL kind of activities. So looking at commercialization activities. And again, companies, if they're looking at these programs, should not be looking for money. They should be looking to align it with their business activity. So essentially getting paid for what they were going to do anyway. So the EIC Accelerator is a program that would fund disruptive, kind of innovative companies to commercialize their product or process or business model. So it's very close to market. And that can be funding of usually around 2.5 million. But there's an equity element there that can also be accessed. So it's essentially like a venture capital. The European Commission can fund companies with equity of up to 15 million euros. And we've had a lot of companies access this and be successful in it. Again, it's for disruptive innovation, not incremental innovation. It's not for everybody, but again, we've had a large number of successes with it.
So they're the more, as Sinead was saying, you have the more kind of groundbreaking type of innovations, and then the more kind of incremental innovations that can happen between. So there are different, depending on which you're deciding to embark on. There are different routes, I suppose.
Yeah, and touching there again, Magella, on at a kind of company level in terms of best practice and looking at sustainability within house and what we should be doing or what a company should be doing there. We also, within Enterprise Ireland, have a number of other supports, and they're essentially called the green offer. So they're not particularly around innovation and product development or process development. They're more about activities at an operational level within the company to improve sustainability. So there is a lot of people have probably seen it or heard it recently, the Climate Action Voucher, which has been launched by Enterprise Ireland, and that's I think it's in around €1,800, €2,000, to employ a consultant to come in and really carry out a baseline kind of look at the company, what we should be doing, what we could be doing, where we could benefit from improvements in sustainability, and maybe a basic sustainability plan. And then it moves up to the Green Start program, which again, increase in funding, bringing in a consultant that we have on a database. You can pick your own consultant to try and improve activities around particular areas within the company. And then moving on further then in your journey on sustainability, there's the Green Plus, which can be up to 100,000 or slightly more, depending on the activity. And that's much more embedding sustainability at quite a high level within the company. So it could be, for example, looking at implementing a recognised environmental management standard or system in-house, or developing a kind of large-scale sustainability strategy for the company. So they're available, and we have seen a big increase in uptake. And over the last 2 years, I'd agree with what Sinead has said. I've worked at this a long time, and it's great to see over the last 2 years the kind of improvement and the push in terms of climate action activities at a government level and at a company level as well. And I really see that at a European level in terms of product and process development, that the influence of both regulation and sustainability initiatives are having.
Yeah, and I suppose there is a question from the audience here, and I'll bring in some more of the questions from the audience because there's quite an amount of chat going on as well. But like one question is, what type of policy instruments need to be in place for small and micro businesses to embrace circular resource models? Well, it seems there are a lot of instruments.
There are a lot of instruments out there. I'll just give you an example of one that I work on around products, and that would be the Eco-Design Directive. And what we've seen over the last couple of years, basically the Eco-Design Directive looks at its regulation for market failure to help companies or make companies develop more sustainable products, usually more energy efficient, but also more environmentally better products. And that's had a huge impact over the last 10 years. You'll see everybody, it works silently in the background. Your lighting has changed, your HVAC has changed, all types of products you use in your house have changed, everything from standby, etc., etc. So with this, we've seen a change in the last 2 years where we've seen regulation looking at circular economy and right to repair, things like that. So we'll see in terms of companies, I've been talking to companies on this very recently, in terms of even some of the larger IT companies looking at changing their business models because of this. Because if they're going to develop products that are much more sustainable, last longer, are much more durable, better for the environment, they need to retain value in terms of their business. So they're looking at moving away from a sale model to much more as a sell as a service model. So they'll retain the product. You may not have ownership of the product, but it's obviously a much better, in terms of circular economy. I mean, I've seen this with a lot of the large IT companies moving into this over the next few years. Okay.
And some of our other audience members are adding into the conversation as well, some other kind of instruments as well, like speco.ie, I think it's called, or for Green Start, 80% funding, or Enterprise Ireland's Green Plus, up to 30,000 per consultant. With 10,000 net cost. So there are lots of kind of snippets and little bits of information that people are putting up. So what we might do is we'll send all of these out, what people have added to here as well in the conversation, for people to be able to see it all together, for all those who have registered. There was another question that came in earlier on for you, Marion, and the question is, the US EPA had a flexible regulatory program called Project XL. Would you see value in the Irish EPA having something similar? And the person submitting this said, I think XL was used where new innovation processes or products were involved. Are you aware of that, Marion?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. And I'm not aware of it, so I can't answer intelligently, unfortunately. I'd love to give you an articulate answer. What I would say is that I think that I from what I understand with the current Irish EPA, part of the issues is capacity, the pandemic, other things that are going on. And, so I really feel for them. I think they are trying their best. But I think we feel like we have a very straightforward, easy solution that it would be great if they had a bit more capacity and a bit more flexibility, but I'm not sure how to design that in. And I would be really interested in the program that you're talking about and doing a bit more research on that. So feel free to pass that on to me.
Great, yeah, we'll include that in what goes out to everybody, because as I said, there's lots of coming in on the comments of various different resources and links and things like that people may be interested in. And also the link that that Mark had mentioned as well. It may not be appearing very well, the knowledge transfer link may not be appearing very well for everybody in the chat, but we'll send that out to everybody by email as well. So perhaps, Marion, if I could just go to you again about kind of the risks, like what would be the main risks for a company in engaging in kind of this type of innovation or innovating around sustainability?
Right. Well, I mean, I think first of all, you have to take the financial risks into account, right? I mean, you have to look at the outlay and sort of look at your plan. And you have to balance that against what the market is asking for and what the regulatory environment is looking at and what's coming down the line. I think there is a financial risk for some of these things, but what we've discovered is that actually the opposite is true. We're going to be saving an enormous amount of money just because we're reusing these bins and we don't have to buy them again new. So the cost savings are actually really adding up. But I do think obviously these things take sitting down with your CFO or your finance team and really having a look at your projections and trying to understand what it's going to look like down the line and doing your market research so that you kind of cover some of these things. Those would be the biggest, obviously the biggest risks in my mind.
Okay. And you were hired as a sustainability project manager. I mean, is that what an SME needs to do you think, is hire somebody in like your role or create a role like this?
Well, so it's interesting. I did not come originally from a sustainability background. I have a very, very different background. I was a show jumping trainer for many, many years. So I can't say that I came in with an enormous amount of sustainability experience. That's not true. I've been working in the past basically 4 years in it. However, I think that what companies need to do is find people that are passionate about sustainability and that are willing to learn and be educated and especially for SMEs, maybe they don't have the capacity to hire a sustainability officer or someone to really oversee this part of it. I think as long as someone's open-minded and willing to learn and be passionate, that's enough. Once you have an advocate, you can start there and move. And in particular, I would say it's important to get your senior leadership team on board. If it's not coming from the top, find that person that's passionate about doing a project and get the senior leadership team on board.
So that does sound like it's one of the key kind of enablers, or if a company was to look at the organization kind of it does have to come from the leadership that they're vested in this and to make change in this space.
Yeah, I would argue that absolutely it has to come. If it doesn't come directly from the leadership, they at least have to be really on board for it. And I think it's pretty easy to make the case these days. I mean, everybody is aware of the crisis that we're in, as we have discussed and as Sinead mentioned. We really are under a time crunch now. We do have about 10 years or less to really turn things around in the climate and the biodiversity crises. And these things are in the media and in the news all the time. And it's pretty easy to make a compelling case for why a change needs to happen, whether it's just within your own company or whether it's the products that you're selling out to a broader audience. And you can make an enormous amount of difference, and everybody has to play their part. So I think it's it's not that hard to get your senior leadership on board.
Yeah, and as Sinead said, there are the significant regulatory drivers that are happening anyway. That means that everybody kind of does have to get on board. What I thought we might kind of finish up with and is maybe just going to each of you just to ask kind of, or to give your final kind of piece of advice or tips to SMEs that are listening here that may be thinking of embarking on or may need to or should need to embark on innovating around sustainability. Like, what from your experience, what would your kind of advice be? Maybe we'd start with Sinead.
Hi, yeah. So you're either somebody who knows about sustainability and is passionate about it, and you really want to do something, or you're not really sure where to start. So it can be very difficult to navigate it all. So I would say, I would echo everything else everybody said. You need to collaborate on things. You need to find support, find those mechanisms, find those companies that are out there that are available to you now. They mentioned them there, Speakco services, e-commerce, Anish. There's loads of them on the database that you can access through Green for Micro if you're a micro business. Then there's the Next Level Up, and then there's all the ones that Mark mentioned as well. So if you start somewhere, just start and do something, and then things will start to change. Get that perspective.
Right. And Marion, what would your tips kind of be?
Yeah, I would echo what Sinead said, that taking the first step is really important, even if it's a small step. I would say, even if it's just gathering a bunch of your teammates out for coffee and brainstorming on, what can we do and how can we make a difference and who do we need to talk to, and then reaching out and collaborating. Everything that everyone does, whether it's on individual level, a company level, or a broad societal level, is absolutely vital for the next few years. So just getting in there and getting stuck in and getting started and getting everybody on board would be my advice. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And finally, Mark, particularly, are there particular tips around accessing funding that
the main tip, Magella, that I would give is there are again a multitude of contact points out there in the agencies. They're all very good signposters. Usually they're all very, very well aware of other programs out there funded by other agencies, both at a national and international level. So it can save you a lot of time, energy, money and resources if you contact these in the, first of all, a lot of my time is spent advising companies what funding not to access. And it's simply to avoid resources being spent where they shouldn't be spent, projects that do not fit the purpose of the programs they're looking at. So a quick chat with a contact point. If I can't do it or someone else can't do it, they'll usually direct you in the right direction to the appropriate contact. And in-house, I'd say, if you're going to access resources or looking to access funding resources, make sure you allocate a champion in-house, to progress that activity. It can't be approached half-heartedly, especially for some of the larger programs. If you make a decision to go for this funding, you really need to put the resources into it.
Mm-hmm. And equally so, I know Enterprise Ireland does collaborate a lot with InterTrade Ireland. So if you're looking at the All Ireland, and if we have companies from Northern Ireland as well, that there are contact points within InterTrade Ireland or Enterprise Ireland that companies can access. So we actually, I asked each of the panelists for their kind of final tips and pieces of advice to give to SMEs, and we kind of did up a slide that we might show now, and that we'll also distribute to everybody that has registered for this particular event today, if you're interested. And also what we'll send along is there was lots of brilliant pieces of links and information on various different funding programs and different types of best practice things that people have inputted into the chat function. So we'll include that as well on a slide that everybody has there, so that you'll have it in one piece. We'll also send out a feedback evaluation form for this particular event, if you wouldn't mind filling that out. And I just want to finish with, first of all, thanking our panelists for taking the time today to join us. So thank you to Marion, Sinead and Mark for taking the time. We really appreciate it, and it was really interesting. And there's so much more that can be talked about in this conversation around, but it's a really important conversation that SMEs and all enterprises and people need to have. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the time you've given today to talk to everybody. Thank you to everybody in the audience, and particularly to those who've participated in the conversation and have added in comments and have given your own tips and your own web links and things like that. As I said, we'll put that together and send it out to everybody. And of course, thanks to InterTradeIreland that supports these events. And we'll be running a number of additional events over the coming months, particularly in the autumn. So keep an eye out on your email inboxes for further information on future events that are aimed at supporting SMEs in their innovation process. So thank you again for joining us today and joining the conversation. And I hope you all enjoyed it and have a good evening. Thank you, everybody.